My name is Claude McInnes, and I'm supposed to say that I'm a former Jackson State student, but I'm an alum, and I would never be anything former Jackson State. And I was told by those folks making this that they want me to talk about my years at Jackson State. But I think it's appropriate, really, and put it into perspective how I got to Jackson State. When I was a sophomore in high school, I used to go over on the Jackson State campus, and I always was impressed by the folks I saw on campus, and I wanted to be part of that. I was so impressed with the young men walking around with their turtleneck sweaters on and their collision haircuts and what have you, and they always looked so sharp to me. They always seemed to be so intelligent and in tuned, so I said I was going to go to Jackson State. I was also part of the civil rights movement, and I was in jail. And while I was in jail, some guys came into our cell and they beat us with the keys. And I was mystified because the guys who beat us had on civilian clothing, and most of the folks who beat us in those days had on uniforms, and we kind of expected the uniformed police officers to beat us. I didn't expect that from those folks. So when I asked who they were, they told me that they were youth counselors. And I thought, youth counselors are not supposed to beat you. And I asked, well, how do you become a youth counselor? And of course, these folks was Caucasians. And they told me that I could never be a youth counselor because you have to be a youth counselor, you have to go to college. And you are not going to be able to go to college. And it struck me, I said, I can go to Jackson State. So in order for me to pay to go to Jackson State, I joined the military because the military had the GI Bill, which would allow me to pay my tuition. After I spent 3 years in the military, I came out and I enrolled at Jackson State. I was at Jackson State, I think, for the most exciting times in any black college history. I was at Jackson State between '67 and '73, and it was the heyday of black schools, I think. And there were so many things happening at Jackson State. Understand, when I left Jackson, Mississippi in 1964, girls was wearing skirts down to their calves and at most block heels. When I came to Jackson State and registered in '67, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. The young women on that campus was walking around with miniskirts and halter tops, and I asked one of my friends, what did they do to their hair? Because I thought it was so beautiful and gorgeous. He said, man, those are naturals. So I had not actually seen black women with their hair natural in my life. And I just thought it was beautiful. Also, you have to know during those years at black schools, and especially at Jackson State, the best black minds showed up on those campuses. While at Jackson State, there were more, while I was at Jackson State, there was more than 25 underground newspapers. You could go almost anywhere and engage in any kind of conversation that was relevant to the day. So there was so much activity on those campuses. While on the campus, myself and several others, we formed 3 or 4 different organizations on the campus. One of the 2 organizations we formed on campus that I was very proud of. One, we formed the Sociological Society, where social majors and people like that could have a place they could come and express their views. But I think the most important organization we formed was the Vet Club, which aided vets in coming to school and earning degrees. So I was very, very proud of that. During the undergraduate, when I was undergraduate, we also took up the issue of more reasonable price books. When I first started at Jackson State had this policy that they would only sell hardback books. And of course, everybody knows hardback books are 40 to 60% higher than softback books or paperback books. Most of us didn't buy our books on campus. We bought our books at different colleges that were located in this city. I bought most of my books at Millsaps because Millsaps sold paperback books. We started telling the administration that this didn't make any sense for Jackson State students to have to go to Mississippi College or Millsaps to buy books. And they need to change this because most of us could not afford those hardback books. through our efforts, the bookstore started stocking paperback books. There are many other changes that we fought for on the campus that I think came to fruition. Better representation on different kinds of organizations, allowing almost any student who wanted to run for office. Believe it or not, when I first got to Jackson State, it was almost cliche that if you were just an ordinary student, you were not going to be a member of the SGA. So we fought hard to change all of that. I tell you the other thing we did at Jackson State to the Vet Club. We started the Miss Afro contest. What we did was thought that black women ought to be encouraged to look as natural and as beautiful as they are. So we started encouraging Jackson State students to look natural and wear naturals. So we had the first Miss Natural contest on campus. From that, believe it or not, I grew Miss Black America. The first Miss Black America contest was held on the Jackson State campus. And a former JSET named Helen Ford, I believe her name was, I hope I'm not making a mistake, won Miss First Black America, and she was from Jackson State. So I'm proud of that we accomplished that. I was also on the campus when the shooting occurred. It was a shock to us. Always on those campuses during those days, during the springtime, there would be a small disturbance. And Jackson State was no different. But the disturbance could not be anything close to being called a riot. At that time, Lynn Street ran through the campus of Jackson State. And young white men used to drive through the campus and hang out their cars and offer female students at Jackson State money, mooners, and throw stuff at you and stuff like that. And some of the males would throw bricks at them. And so that kind of small things had happened at Jackson State. It was a total shock to us when those National Guards and Highway Patrolmen marched on the Jackson State campus and shot the campus up. Shot it up. Just a little bit of caveat to that. I had to do a senior paper. And I was a senior at Jackson State during the shooting. And I had given my paper to one of the female students that lived in Alexander Hall to type. And she got shot. And when I found my paper, it was covered in blood. So I have a real close connection to that shooting that happened at Jackson State. I also finished graduate school at Jackson, and probably one of the best programs ever for training teachers. I am totally and eternally grateful to Jackson State and its faculty and administration for educating me and really propelling me to become the person I am. I like to think that I've had some successes, and I think I owe it most all to Jackson State. Jackson State has come up, I think, has made a lot of progress, and that progress really started with, I think, probably the best college president ever in the state of Mississippi was Dr. John Peoples, who was a graduate of Jackson State. Also, if I remember correctly, Dr. Peoples was also was an All-American football player while he was on the campus. And when John Peoples came back to that campus, his whole job and dream was to make Jackson State a university, and he did. And I am very proud to have been on that campus when John Peoples was president, because I think it was our heyday, and I don't believe that Jackson State would have been the place it is today without the leadership and the love and the direction of John Peoples. I want to encourage all students at Jackson State to remember the great heritage they have at Jackson State, and to know that Jackson State has prevailed and it has become a leader among schools, and that almost every black school in this nation has benefited from the efforts of Jackson State, because Jackson State filed a suit called the Ayers case that proved that the funding for black schools was woefully inadequate. And the federal courts finally ruled that those funding inadequacies had to be adjusted and corrected. So Jackson State really is the reason you see so much construction on the campus of many black schools across this nation. So Jackson State is a leader, and it has proven itself to be a leader, and I'm just proud to associate with it. And I want all the Jackson State alums to be very proud of their school and be proud of the associations that they have at Jackson State. I know this is being filmed because the young lady who's actually my niece is a student there, and it's for mass communications. So let me talk about mass communications in two different ways at Jackson State. When I first got to the campus, of course, the college, the paper on campus was called the Blue and White Flash. But most of us thought the Blue and White Flash was just an organ of the administration. And we didn't read it that much. I think I stated before, while I was on the campus, there was at least 20 underground newspapers on that campus. That is, students themselves printed their own newspapers. And so there was all kinds of written material on the campus when I was there. So most students didn't depend on the Blue and White Flash. We read the papers that other students put out that was not under the thumb of the administration at that time. And I want to talk about the mass communication department for just a wee bit. When WJSU radio station first was implemented, I was on the board of advisors, and we helped created that station. In the very beginning, it was a very weak station. It only had 10 watts of power, and I remember loaning WJSU radio station a lot of my music so they could have music to play while it was on the air. So we really nurtured that stadium. Just as a caveat to that, there was many people who listened to WJSU in those days refused to move from the West Jackson area, because if you moved 5 or 6 miles from the station, you couldn't hear it. And there was folks who refused to move from out west because they liked to listen to WJSU because it was the only jazz outlet at that time in the city of Jackson. So WJSU radio station had a lot of impact, positive impact on the Jackson State community and the surrounding campus. Let me say this also, that when I was at Jackson State was a community campus. That is, it was just open to the community, and you could walk on that campus from any direction. So lots of times you didn't know where the campus ended and the community started. I'm sad, of course, now that we have fenced Jackson State off, but I understand the safety concerns, but I am concerned about it. Again, I'm very proud to have gone to Jackson State. I'm very proud that I have chosen Jackson State, and I would encourage others to take full advantage of what I think is one of the greatest schools that were created.